Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Curly's Ag Country Living series. Today you have to put up with my voice, unfortunately, but it is what it is, and we are going to talk about irrigation. Spring's here, spring's upon us, so next thing what we need to do will be watering. So without any further ado, let's jump into the show. Spring is upon us. This is actually the second video of spring. I have not been sick from coronavirus. It is okay. You won't get contagious, at least over the video. I was doing something fairly stupid last week and sucked in a heap of acid. And she burnt all the back of my throat. Not acid as in drug acid, but you know, like acid as in like cleaning acid. Anyway, we don't want to dwell on them sort of things, but I've got this bad voice, and unfortunately we're going to be away for the next 3 weeks, so I'm going to try and get a couple of videos done for you today. We've got a couple that we've been doing, that I've been, putting together, compiling. One on soil test I've been doing for a couple of weeks now. It just takes time for the labs and stuff to get back to us. So we're going to get onto that for the next couple of weeks. Now, today's topic will be irrigation. Irrigation is something that is really necessary in springtime, summertime especially. When your crops are drying out really quick from the heat waves and the hot winds coming through from the westerlies. We, unlike most farmers that you'd see on YouTube, farm in the subtropics, and the subtropics means you've got a completely different paradigm on how you farm. We do most of our farming in winter. The guys in the colder climates do most of their farming in spring and summer. So though it is spring and everything's waking up, the weeds are waking up, the pests are waking up, the bugs are waking up, it's not typically something that we do a lot of in summer. We will be farming, we'll be doing pumpkins and watermelons. We'll also be doing probably our potatoes, sweet potatoes, and we'll keep a couple of the other crops going that we can. But yeah, that's the main thing we're doing in summer, and mainly focusing on that tourism industry. People are doing a lot more camping and stuff like that, so we want to open up that sector, and we're going to do videos on that too. But irrigation is something that you really need. Now, as far as I'm aware, there's only 2 forms of irrigation. You've got above ground and on/below ground. And with your above ground stuff, you got sprinklers. So I want to touch on both types today. I want to touch on the sprinklers. As far as I'm concerned, there's only 2 varieties of sprinklers. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm only aware of 2 varieties of sprinklers. And then you've got your on ground or sub ground, which is your drip systems. We typically only use on-ground drip systems. There's some sub-ground drip systems that you can see. They will often rip them in with massive rippers on massive machines, or dig big trenches for your fruit trees and stuff like that. And what that will cause will be a slow, constant moisture. So with irrigation, one of the main considerations you want to think about is how much water you have. So when it comes to water, we here have 2 water sources, and this is the main reason we brought this new property, because at our other property we had similar 2 water sources, but neither of them were as good. So here on this property we've got our creek, which is just down here. You can see all the trees across the creek. So this is the Bremer River, as I've spoken about previously. You can see all the Chinese elms just starting to bust out in leaf, the springtime again, like I said. And then we've got a bore. So we drilled a bore a couple months ago, and we got 22,000 litres an hour pumping capacity, bore capacity, and our Siemens per microcentimetre was in the range of 200, which is basically drinking water. It's really good quality water. So this here was a real blessing about this property. I had the sneaking suspicion. I'd done my research on that sort of stuff. For anyone in Queensland, there's a really good free resource called Queensland Globe. Now this resource is put out by the government, and on there you can see all the bores. You can see you can see so much information if you can work the website. You nearly need a PhD just to work the website, but Queensland Globe, you can Google that or whatever. I'm fairly sure that they got similar stuff in America. I'd assume they have similar stuff in other states of Australia as well. It's probably pretty well a standard in most civilized countries, with that sort of a history on department of agriculture and stuff like that. So you can go around and see what your neighbours have got as far as a bore situation goes, what sort of water sources could possibly be underneath you. And so we struck water here at 50 metres, I think it's 52 metres or 51 metres, and we drilled on a 54. Now, to be clear, we can't pump 22,000 litres of water an hour because it's only 120mm bore casing. To pump that sort of quantity of water, you need like a 200, 250, 300mm bore casing, and we don't need that. We don't need that, number one, and we don't have that capacity. So within Queensland regulations, anyone who's adjacent to a river or so holds a property that's that fences to the river, or has a bore, are allowed to pump out for stock and domestic purposes. Now I believe that means that we're allowed to pump up to 1.5 acres. So this here is not a domestic purpose. That is what they class a domestic purpose is, if you're irrigating under 1.5 acres. Now we well and truly come in under one. We've probably got about half an acre of cultivation this year. We may expand that as time goes on. And then we've got the same for the bore. So essentially we've got the capacity of doing 3 acres of farming out of these 2 water sources. So for us in this property, water is not an issue. It's something we've got in abundance, and so that's why for us, you can see we've mainly opted for sprinklers. So we're going to start on our sprinklers. So this here's a classic style of sprinkler. You've got your water jet that comes out the front, out of that hole there. Let me see. Yep, so the water jet comes out of this hole here. This one here has got a replaceable water jet. So what you can do with that is you can take that out and put a different size hole, so it'll shoot different amount of water, depending also on your pump flow rate as to how much you need for that. Then it's got your striker here, which strikes, and that's what makes it turn. So it blows off, the water hits it. The water hits it in here when it comes in. Sorry, the water hits here, comes through here and blows that, and then that shoots that out. When that shoots out, it goes out, the spring pulls it tight, and then it releases, and that momentum built up makes it shoot around a little bit. So some of these you can adjust the spring, but it's got 2 other adjusters. This little screw here that hits the water and it makes it spray out, and you got this one here which adjusts the distance it shoots. So if you make it like that, it slows it down so it comes in closer because the water hits it and it shoots it down, or if you take that back out, it makes it shoot further. And then with these little keys down here, you can drop this down and that'll set, so you can shoot from left to right, so you can limit the amount of travel it has. These ones here are a fairly good quality one. They're a little bit more expensive than your cheap ones. They're made in Spain, as you can see on there. For me personally, you know, everything about farming and what you do, it's about long-term investments. And if you get the cheap stuff to start with, sometimes you have to, but you know, after a while you have to buy it again. So I try and get the better quality stuff if I can. So even if you don't get this specific sprinkler, 90% of sprinklers are like this, and they're just different sizes of this. The other sort of sprinkler is called a Wobbler sprinkler, and we're going to check that out now. Okay, so this is the Wobbler. Now the Wobbler is completely different to the other one. Works off a different principle, and the Wobbler main effect is that it doesn't have any more moving parts than this one here. So it doesn't have all those springs and flicky things and stuff. It is limited in the fact that you can't limit the direction. It just shoots 360 degrees evenly everywhere. Now I really like the Wobbler. This is a jet here, you can see, but I really like it because it has a really low pressure requirement. So when the water comes out of here, it just hits the bottom of that spike and then deviates each which way, and that pushing it like that, for example, and she just rolls around like that the whole time, as you can see here. So what happens with the wobbler? One of the biggest advantage of the wobbler is that one of the biggest advantages of the wobbler is that it doesn't have such a high pressure requirement as other sprinklers to work. So if you've got a low pressure water source, I mean, essentially you can build pretty well any water source up to a high pressure, but pressure with flow rate. So our pump's pumping about 3,000 litres an hour out of the creek. Now it can pump up to, I think, 120 psi, which is like 9 bar of pressure, which is fairly high pressure. The thing is, the more taps you open, the less the pressure goes. So we initially started with wobblers, and we still use wobblers up on top of the mountain on the tomatoes and the zucchinis and stuff, because by the time you pump the water from the creek right at the top of the mountain, you know, that's about 60 meters of higher, plus it's got to go through about 500 meters of pipe. The calculation you can do, but it's about an extra 100 meters ahead, so the pressure up there and the flow rate's a lot less. If we had them sprinklers there, we could only run maybe one at a time, whereas we're running 13 or 14 wobblers at a time up on top of the mountain. The other thing about the wobblers is, with that low pressure, is they throw much bigger droplets and much softer. So if you've got a windy situation, they're not going to be as bad on you, the wind taking the water away when it's running. So out in this garden here, the opposite end of the scale, we have obviously the sprinklers I just showed you, but you can see we've only had to run, we initially started with wobblers, but we changed the sprinklers, so we've got 4 sprinklers, and they're 6 meters apart. These sprinklers can throw 12 meters, and a wobbler will only throw 6 meters. So with the overlap that we have here, what we've been able to do is take every second sprinkler out. So you can see we've got a head here where our water comes out of here, and then we had one here, but we've removed it, so that's 6 meters between it. So now we've basically been able to remove a whole run of sprinklers, which has increased our productivity. There's less irrigation hit stuff and mow around, because wherever your irrigation is going to be going to get stuck. So you know, from this set of sprinklers here to that set of sprinklers, there's 12 meters. So we've effectively been able to delete half of our sprinklers. Now, that's our sprinklers, and then we're going to get into our drip tape, which is the only other thing that we use. And our drip tape, yeah, it's pretty simple. I'll show that in a second. Okay, so here we are up on top of the mountain. If you've been hearing that noise in the background, they're having a big motorbike day next door. The neighbour owns like all this land across here. I think it's like a couple of thousand acres, and they just want twice a year. Just a heap of people come out and ride motorbikes for charity or something, not sure. Anyway, so you'll hear that in the background. But yeah, so here this is up on top of the mountain, and we've got our 2 types of irrigation up here. We've got the wobblers, as I mentioned to you before, because of that low pressure we've got up here. You can see we've got 1, 2, 3 rows that are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 deep. So 5 3s are 15. So it wasn't quite as many as I said. Oh no, it was. Yeah, I said 12, didn't I? So there's 15 wobblers that all run on one irrigation set. You can see we've got our zucchinis here pumping. And as I mentioned previously, you know, we put this stuff up here because it gets less frost, more sunshine, and better ventilation. So yeah, we've got our tomatoes here. So we've had a fairly bad run with the tomatoes this year due to the wind factor, and we've had a couple of frosts get up here as well, which was not really good. But so on the tomatoes we have drip irrigation, and the reason for drip irrigation on the tomatoes is because tomatoes don't like getting their leaves wet. So tomatoes are really problematic, susceptible to fungus, and fungus obviously needs moisture to grow. So that's why we planted them up here, because they get the good ventilation to dry the fungus out. But it also needs to have underground irrigation, so we don't wet the leaves too much. So this here's your drip irrigation. And you might be able to see there's a little hole just right there. Now what happens is it's just flat. It comes in a roll, it's flat. It's really, really cheap. We're talking like, I think I pay 2 cents or 5 cents a meter for the drip irrigation. It's Toro brand, it's American. I think you got to buy a roll of 1 kilometer. So it's a bit of money to start out with. I think it's 250 bucks for a kilometer. I don't know, you can do the maths and work out whatever that is. But yeah, so I basically buy that full roll, and that'll do me for a couple of years of irrigation here. We try and reuse it. If you damage it, like you put a fork through it or something, you can buy little joiners, but it's often not worth the while. You know, at 5 cents a meter, you get, you know, like the tomatoes will be in here 9 months to 12 months, depending on how we go with the season. So you get a full year use out of it, and then you throw it away, and you know, that's 30 meters long by 2, so 60 meters at 5 cents a meter is $3 or something. You know, it's not a lot of, there's not a lot of expense. You know, that's less than a kilo of tomatoes. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, well there you have it. Thanks for putting up with the croaky voice. We've been through our irrigation. I hope that's covered a lot of points for you guys that you might have been curious about. Shout out to Andre Steenberg for the message last week suggesting we do this one. And don't forget to like and subscribe and share it with your friends or family or anyone you think might be interested in this. Until next time, see you guys. Have a good one.